Hey, welcome, Cinema Drunks, to our first episode of Flights and Flicks here on the YouTube channel, which is Cinema Gulp. I'm Ben, and I'm joined with Ben S., another Cinema Gulper on the channel. Hey, Ben.
Hey Ben, how's it going?
I'm so happy right now. I'm happy to have you and me doing this as our first test run of Flights and Flicks. And if people like this, then maybe we will think about going live and answering questions in the chat. But for now, we're keeping it the style that Cinema Gulp is most comfortable with. But let me explain. Flights and Flicks it's a concept and an idea of how can you fit these beautiful Cinema Gulp flights, custom made, by the way, for Cinema Gulp, into a movie. And what I mean by that is we're going to break up the film into 4 different beers. So starting here at the ass end of the paddle, we're going to talk about the story of the movie. After that, we're going to talk about the characters of the movie. After that, we're going to talk about the filmmaker. And then lastly, themes of the movie. So as we get into each one of our beers, we're going to discuss why we picked those beers for those specific things. How do those beers speak to us? And why do we pick those beers for the movie? Why do we pick the movie? Ben, firstly, let's go with you as far as what movie you selected for Flights and Flicks. And I'll say right off the bat, everyone, we selected movies about writers.
Well, when you said we're doing movies about writers, I immediately went to a short list of a subgenre of film I like, which is movies about movies. And that would mean a movie about a screenplay. And my all-time favorite movie about a screenplay is Adaptation, directed by Spike Jonze, Charlie Kaufman, I think 2002. And it's a very unique film about a film. But more specifically, the process of writing a film, which most people don't even consider when it all starts with that. And what's great about this is it's about an adaptation. And the way it's as original as I hope all these beers taste when I drink them.
It is by far one of the most original movies I think I've ever seen. It is so original, and it's ballsy because it's very off-putting to, let's say, for lack of a better term, a normie or something, but not once you get into it. I think the concept of it, and it opens so manic that it can throw people off until you get into the characters and love every situation that they're in.
Definitely. I mean, and it's one of those like perfect films with just the right amount of male masturbation before you kind of like want to check out.
The movie I selected was, I want to say there's debate whether it came out in 99 or 2000. I saw it in 2000. I think it was Oscar worthy in the 2000 year. So maybe it had a small release in 99. But it was probably my favorite movie that year, and it's called Wonder Boys, directed by the late, great Curtis Hanson, who I love so much. He did L.A. Confidential, he did The River Wild, lots of great movies. He went. I forgive him for 8 Mile, but he did his final film that he did in 2012 before he passed was a surf documentary called Searching for Mavericks. And I was really happy that he got to do something like that instead of, I think, In Her Shoes no, he did something before that. I like In Her Shoes, though. Good movie. But yeah, I picked that movie because, again, Grady Tripp, the main character, played by Michael Douglas, is a writer who caught success very early and hasn't been able to sustain it, but is a professor teaching other writers, which is what you do when you're running into that problem of coming up with something yourself. And it's just a great character study. It's very funny. It's got some performances that are fantastic, and it's got a bunch of MCU superheroes in it, which is great. 2 great movies of the early aughts. There's a trend right there. I think the early aughts was a fantastic time for some under the radar, Oscar baity, if you want to call them, films. I don't think either one of them really are that, even though you can consider them that because they're so good at every aspect of it. Charlie Kaufman specifically, just brilliant. But let's get into these movies, shall we? So I'm going to start out for Wonder Boys, and what I have for the story, to represent the story, which is a nice, warm sip of delightful cinema, almost like something really reminded me of it this year, The Holdovers. So people called that movie like a warm hug, and it's always snowing or raining. So I always go to Belgium Whites when I think of warm, cozy, mellow. So the beer I selected for the story of Wonder Boys is an Allagash Belgium style white wheat, and it's wonderful and it's delicious. So Ben, what did you select for story of adaptation?
Well, so adaptation is a meta film, but at its heart, it is technically an adaptation of a book called The Orchid Thief. So this beautiful film that I love wouldn't exist if not for some guy cutting a bunch of flowers and stealing them. So I thought it'd be appropriate to get Daisy Cutter, a pale ale, and from Half Acre, and mm,
Yeah, how is
oh
it?
yeah,
Hey
that's
Ben,
that cuts
cheers.
right to it. Cheers,
Cheers. First
cheers. Oh,
episode of Flights
oh,
and Flicks, my friend.
lights and flicks.
I got it. Where's the logo? Oh, there it is.
Daisy Cutter's Daisy Cutter is a bit of a bitter pale ale, but it's a slight bitterness towards the end of the taste, which is kind of how the movie adaptation goes, I guess. There's funny moments, but everything's twinged with a bit of bitterness, maybe a little disappointment, which is kind of theme in the film. Tells the story from the idea of not quite getting what you want in life, but then finding the joy in what you have, and that beer makes me feel that.
That's great. Well, and for me, even though I did pick kind of a safe Belgium white, it has a nice orange peel kind of aftertaste to it. But for me, I just find Wonder Boy so damn pleasant of a movie. It's funny, the dialogue's great, the characters are great, the interactions of everyone. It almost feels like it's an alternate reality of what it'd be like to live in the bubble, which is like a big fancy college where it's all about the writers and there's little cliques. And the
Yeah,
whole movie takes place during a thing called Word Fest. And you have characters who are becoming writers and characters who are kind of reaching their end. And then you have the sleaze bags that are stealing other people's ideas. And then you have the curious types. And then you have geniuses like James Lear. That name even like sounds like an award-winning author, James Lear, you know? So yeah, that's my pick for this because the plot of the movie is very simple, and so is this beer.
I rewatched Wonder Boys for this, and it's been a long time. And something I didn't remember about the film is how dreamlike it could be at times. To your point, like it's almost like a reality, a little, just a step away from ours. And adaptation leans into that kind of element
A
harder,
lot
but
harder, yeah.
a lot harder. That while adaptation is a really funny movie, I never would call it light necessarily, you know.
Right. Wonder Boys is a comedy first and
Mhm.
foremost. There's
Yeah.
dramatic elements, but nothing too serious. The stakes are never, aside from shooting someone's dog, the stakes are never really that high. So it kind of has that. It has, like I said, it has that pleasant, warm feeling to it where, the most serious thing going on is someone has the opposite of writer's block. They
Yeah.
can't stop writing, and
Yeah.
I mean, and there's some heartbreak, but so much of the movie, and we'll get into this as we go with characters and stuff, but the thing I love about this movie is that you never know if any character is telling the truth because you almost feel like everyone is telling everyone else a story because that's the way writers' minds work. When I got into full writer's mode after college, I started writing a novel and writing some screenplays. I always felt myself like upping be at a party or with friends or family. And the story I told, though true in aspects, I would always romanticize it. And I love Wonder Boys because specifically James Lear and Grady, they're always kind of romanticizing these kind of easy, simple events. And I think the movie is about the story, even though it's about a writer professor. He can't remember, he can't stop writing this novel, but he made an amazing book called The Arsonist's Daughter that everyone loves. And he meets this, or he doesn't meet, but one of his young students, James Lear, is kind of an outcast, kind of a weirdo, and he gets his hand on his manuscript, and it's brilliant. And the movie is basically just about a weekend of Writers Fest going around from speech and lectures to keynotes to going to bars to having parties. And it's a big movie. What I love is about, yeah, I love movies about self-discovery of people that are already past that age of self-discovery. Grady Tripp is an older guy. He's not an old man, but he's an older guy who's kind of had his day, but he's going on a new journey of self-discovery. What that is, we'll get into it, but this movie leaves it mostly ambiguous without a whole lot of resolution, which I really like. Um, and I will say this beer is not very ambiguous, but it is good. We'll find out if it has a resolution or not. But yeah, this beer, what is it with I think it's fairly light on alcohol, but yeah, it's 5.2%. So yeah, that's kind of average, I guess, for a Belgian white. So not much to it. You're not going to hear me slurring my words while we're talking about story.
Watching movies about writers, I'm sometimes reminded that I'm not one, because I should just start from the beginning of where adaptation starts. Adaptation starts during the filming of Being John Malkovich, and I thought this was such a genius thing to
Yeah.
do at the time.
Doesn't John Cusack walk through the frame?
John Cusack is there. The female lead. I'm so bad with actors'
Catherine
names.
Keener.
Catherine Keener. Like the film starts with, it's like, I think, real behind the scenes footage of John Malkovich, like on some like late '90s digital camera, and it's shooting him, and then I think Spike Jonze walks through the frame, and then eventually we find Charlie Kaufman, played by Nicolas Cage, and right at the beginning of the film, the film wants to blur what is fiction and what is reality, because the screenwriting credit goes to Charlie Kaufman and his brother Donald Kaufman, also played by Nicolas Cage, who doesn't exist. So Charlie takes this job adapting The Orchid Thief, and his entire goal is to make a realistic film that is about nothing, where nothing happens, no one changes, nothing changes. And that attitude and the way he perceives a book brings around writer's block that his brother tries to help him get through, and that leads to some very strange events happening.
Yeah. I think it's quite funny that you have a film selected where someone has writer's block, and I have a film selected where someone has the opposite, where they can't stop.
Well, yeah, he had emotional block though, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a point where Hannah, played by the lovely Katie Holmes, says, I think you even describe someone's dental records. You get so detailed in your book.
Yeah, that's funny. Hang on, this is a little Hollywood magic right here, buddy.
All right, I'm with you.
All right,
Hang
give it
on.
to me again, Ben.
Hang on. Okay, so here's the story, and here's to our beers, Allagash and
Daisy Cutter.
Daisy Cutter.
Cut those daisies.
Okay, so moving on to a character. This one, and I gotta say, Ben, I have a huge warehouse of alcohol in my neighborhood called Total Wine and More.
Mhm.
They might be national, I'm not sure, but it's fucking huge. And I went in with a list of beers that I specifically wanted for these categories. And this was the only one that I could find really fast, because I wanted to find a beer that represented not only Grady Tripp's massive kind of addiction to weed, whatever you want to call it, dependence on weed, and how much James smokes of his weed. So I went with a beer from Sweetwater Brewery called Extra Pale Ale 420. because there's a lot of weed smoking in this movie. So I went with a rather strong extra pale. I think it's about 7.5. So this one will actually, hit me a little bit harder. But yeah, I love the character of Grady Tripp so much that uh, subconsciously, when I was writing my novel called The Machine Smasher, um, I had Michael Douglas in my head as the main character, and he was also a college professor who was past his prime. And I never even realized it was probably because I've seen Wonder Boys 100 times.
Hmm.
I think he's a fascinating character. I think it's my favorite performance of Michael Douglas. And I'll let you go. What'd you select for character?
So, uh, for character, I picked a beer that I thought represented a couple of defining moments for Charlie in the film. Um, and Charlie's character is motivated mainly by fear and self-loathing and loneliness, and he allows those things to kind of form his decisions, where his brother Donald is the opposite, right? So something that happens a couple times in the film is Charlie goes to a restaurant and he orders the key lime pie, and eventually he asks out the waitress, who makes it very clear she's creeped
Ooh,
out,
yeah,
and
by
just
the
that
great Judy Greer.
moment, that's right. And just that moment of sadness, and key lime pie is not going to fix that, but maybe uh the fuck is this called again? Good vibrations. This banana cream pie beer will do the trick.
That's an
Because
awesome name.
we all know banana cream pie is better than key lime cream pie.
But is
And
it
this
as good
is,
as Judy Greer's?
I think the cream is fresher, to be honest. This is a Hefeweizen with bananas, vanilla cream, and get this, other natural flavors.
I'm jealous though. That sounds really good. I
It
mean, it
is
sounds
really,
kind of sweet, but it sounds good.
it's sweet. It's really good. Um,
Cheers to that.
imagine you passed out with banana bread in your mouth and it just all liquefied and went down. It's delicious.
Oh, that's awesome. You passed out and you didn't choke though.
No, 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 no. You lived. You lived through the choking.
I love the
So
characters in your movie.
yeah, the characters are great, but like Charlie, like his whole thing, like him and Donald are just so different. Like Donald's a very positive person.
Yeah, he's a cool one.
He's a cool one. He is kind of a nerd too in a different way. They're both like big kids, which is why Charlie will just go into a place just for a piece of pie, which I totally would do also. But he's just a really lonely, sad guy, and I think those two scenes in the film where he orders pie just really exemplify how desperate he is to make a connection with someone,
Yeah.
that he would really strain a reason to go to this place and order a pie from this specific waitress, who he only meets twice. He doesn't even like really put the effort in. So hopefully this banana cream pie will sweeten his day a little bit.
And his nighttime masturbation fantasies are very similar to someone I know. I'll leave it at that. I love so many characters in adaptation. Chris Cooper, he was kind of like a revelation in this movie. I mean, not a revelation in the fact that no one knew who he was, but he's just fascinating in this movie. He
There,
kind of
there's
steals it.
there's so many great characters in this film. There's Chris Cooper, LaRoche, the orchid thief who's missing his front teeth. There's
Ron
uh,
Livingston's funny as hell as the sleaze bag.
Meryl Streep is great in this.
Yeah.
She's like you think the entire film she's like the only person that doesn't have an insane life and problems, only to find
Yeah.
out that's not the case, which is where the fiction part of the film really takes over. But even supporting characters are great. Just a little like psych gags of just like the cast of being John Malkovich awkwardly waving back at Charlie as they're like, it's like they don't even recognize him,
Yeah. Yeah.
but uh,
As much as I love Grady Tripp, I want to talk about Crabtree because it's just another performance in a long list of great performances from Robert Downey Jr. He played this character kind of often back in the 90s. That was when he was starting to kind of fizzle away and get more into drugs. I mean, that's not when he hit rock bottom, but he was losing roles, and this one was perfect for him. He's so funny, and when we get into theme, I'll get more into why he's so important to the overall theme of the movie. But I mean, everything from just like losing the pages out the door and running after to kind of grab the page. Oh, that kills me every time where he's grabbing pages out of the air. I'm talking about when Grady's book goes flying out of the
Mhm.
car, like his entire book. It's so funny. And Robert Downey Jr. was a great, fantastic dramatic actor, but he could be the funniest guy in your movie without even trying
Mhm.
sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think James Lear is sort of the opposite of who I was in at Columbia, where we both went to college, or even just in like creative writing courses where I did want people to see my shit. I wasn't upset that much if they didn't like it. I was outspoken, where like James Lear's that kind of stereotypical quiet genius who's depressed, but is he really? Like that's the thing about him. Every story he tells is bullshit because his mind is always telling his story.
Yeah, yeah.
Great character for that. Like you never know if what he's saying is true.
Yeah, yeah. They find a way. He's still really likable too, because like
Yeah.
he's a fucking liar, is what he really is.
He's a liar, but I don't he's not trying to lie. He's trying to romanticize his life. I live in a
Oh
bus
yeah,
stop.
and
The
and we
guy,
were
and he's
all we
so
were all doing that in
detailed. He's
college.
so detailed.
Yeah.
Oh, this guy gave me a key to the locker so I could put my stuff in at the bus stop. It's all bullshit.
No, but I think when you come to realize they just mix it all up, it made me wonder if he shows up at the party that night in the shadows, like a fucking weirdo, just trying to do his best Rain Man. You know what I mean?
Dude,
Just
yeah, he does.
like
His
I am the
his
book whisperer.
That's not technically his character introduction because he was introduced in the classroom,
Oh yeah.
but that is the point where you figure out who he is, and he's sitting in that little like gazebo, and he's
Hmm.
just sitting there in the dark and the freezing cold, and he's got a gun. He's like, "Oh yeah, it's a cap gun. They don't make caps for this anymore," which we find out it's a real fucking gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a great character. And I even think Katie Holmes, with what she was given, was a nice foil to Grady. She's that student that is completely in love, lust with someone because of their words and because of how good of a writer they are. And yeah, she represents that temptation character. So
Hmm.
I mean, Frances McDormand's really great, but honestly, I don't think she's as good in it as she got. She got some award contention for that, and I was like, really? She's kind of the weakest one for how good she is normally. I didn't find her to have any standout moments in the movie.
Well,
She could
I
have if she
wouldn't.
was given them, but her character's just not that, you know.
Well, I would say there are no standout moments, but she plays a convincing woman
She's
who's
brilliant in everything. I'm not saying
yeah,
she's not, but
she plays a convincing woman who's been impregnated by her fair partner, and
mhm.
she seems like I love with every interaction they have about about their relationship and her pregnancy.
Very
Like
weird.
it does have a twinge of weirdness to it. Like it starts off as like, what do you want to do? We can do whatever. And then she just gets really more like serious about what she wants and what she thinks the right thing
She
is.
flip-flops a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah.
I don't think she flip flops. I think what she does is she backs off because she's afraid to lose him. Until that last interaction where she's basically like, what are you doing? Like
Let me
what
does
you
that does this make sense? She
yeah.
passive aggressively, sarcastically gives him ultimatums.
Yeah. I mean that's basically it.
That's basically it. Yeah. I was hoping that made sense.
LaRoche, the orchid thief in Florida, and then Orlean, played by Meryl Streep, who's the New York Times journalist who a few years ago did a story about him and what he was doing with those orchids and the Native Americans. Um, so what ends up happening in the film is the film constantly moves between the present 2002 and then in the mid 90s back at one point in the film we're at the very beginning of time and we work our way all the way back forward to Charlie starting the script. But while all that's going on, what happened with Orlean is as she's writing the story, she gets to know LaRoche more, and starts to see this like diamond in the rough almost. Like she sees this beauty in his sadness. But what's more is she sees that he's passionate about things and has this drive and a want for things, where she seems to lack. And her whole passion is to try to find some passion, which leads to down the line LaRoche to keep himself interesting to her, um, gets her hooked on a drug, and she becomes an addict.
Dude, that
And she,
straw was like a fucking Scarface straw, dude.
yeah, Meryl Streep's the bad guy. Everybody, her life was so not exciting. It was so bland. There was nothing, no vivaciousness, nothing to keep her interest, that she had to get high for that. I think it's in part because, like, there's a scene when they're on the phone. I think she's in New York and he's back in Florida, where he talks about how when he was a kid nobody liked him, and he missed his mom because his mom was kind to him, and she's passed. And I just think there's this connection in the loneliness there, like Charlie's trying to connect through people through his loneliness. Donald's the only person in the film that doesn't struggle with those kinds of things, and for Orlean though, she gets hooked on this drug, and it becomes this grotesque romance between her and LaRoche. But there's some kind of weird love there.
It's really weird.
It's really weird.
That's definitely one of the most unique characters that Meryl Streep's played, because she's played a lot of interesting characters, and clearly she's won a lot of Oscars. But this one was a little against type for her, like especially towards the end. I think, she really knocked it out of the park, as did everybody in the movie. But she's definitely fascinating. Everyone in adaptation's fascinating. Like, it's even Tilda Swinton. Tilda Swinton's character is just, even though it's kind of the early part of her career, so she was playing sort of a simple person, she always just adds shit to her. Her comedic timing's always been really great and underrated.
Yeah, I only got a chance to watch through it again the one time before we recorded, but is her dialogue between her lunch for lunch at the beginning of the film with Charlie, and her dialogue later in the film with Orlean, is that pretty much word for word the same thing?
I think so.
I think it is.
So.
Yeah. Which says a lot about her character.
Yeah. Well, she's the fucking
studio rep.
The agent, right? Or
she's just studio rep. Yeah,
studio rep. Same.
Ron Livingston's the agent. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, cheers to characters. If you're good.
It does. Ching ching.
Hey. Moving on to what I think might be my favorite category, just to pay respect. We're doing filmmakers of these respective movies, and for Wonder Boys, this was the late great Curtis Hanson. As I said before, he did some great films. He was one of the best. He had a specific voice, and we'll get into that voice. But for the beer that I selected for Curtis Hanson, is called Lead Dog's Biggest Little Blonde. Now, a blonde ale doesn't really have much to do with Curtis Hanson, but the brewery is located in his home state of Nevada, and that's what I wanted to do. He's actually born in Reno. This is not made in Reno, but it is in Nevada. So I just want to pay tribute to Curtis Hanson with this beer, because it was made in his home state, and he has been missed for a long time in the film industry. He's made some amazing movies, and God, I always get choked up when I talk about filmmakers I love that have passed away. And the booze probably doesn't help that either, but I love him. And here's to you, Curtis Hanson. You're a great man. I mean, if you don't love LA Confidential, you don't love movies. Just saying.
I'll drink to that.
Yeah. What about yourself there, sir?
Well, in his stay for Mr. Spike Jonze, I think it was okay to raise that glass. I think he would agree with everything you just said. But in honor of Spike Jonze, I got Away from the Norm American Amber Ale by Moore Brewing Company. I got it just because of the name. It's an American amber ale. I got it because the story of adaptation is, of course, very much like Charlie Kaufman, where he tries to get away from the norm with his stories. But Spike Jonze has always been that kind of director too. Even back when he was doing music video stuff, with like Daft Punk and the Beastie Boys and pretty much whoever you can think of. He's doing really original, groundbreaking work. And going back and watching this film, I had to check his filmography, and I was surprised that he's only done 4 features, and I was unaware of that actually. I always thought it was more for some reason. So he, after being John Malkovich in Adaptation, he did Where the Wild Things Are and Her. And one thing I can say about each of those 4 films that they have in common is that they get away from the norm. They do really interesting stuff visually and with story and with character development. And that's a beer that if Spike Jonze doesn't drink this beer, he must sweat it or something because it's what the stuff he's made out of.
Cheers to that.
Mhm.
I think Where the Wild Things Are did terribly at the box office because of how great it is. If it was a dumb, stupid, normal children's adaptation to a children's story, it would probably done really well. But he decided to do something completely different with that movie. And I know we're not talking about that movie, but Where the Wild Things Are is so ambitious, and I respect the hell out of him for making it the way he did. The
Mhm.
movie's hard to watch. It's
Yeah,
heartbreaking.
yeah.
I love it.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Yeah, it's a
um,
great film.
so I think the first movie, I don't think I know the first Curtis Hanson movie I ever saw in the theater, and don't hate him for this. He didn't write it, but it was a directing job, and it was the early '90s. He wasn't LA Confidential guy yet. Was The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, which is
Great movie.
actually for the early '90s. It was actually kind of an interesting thriller.
Hmm.
With some, it has some staples and some aesthetic of his for sure, his early days of that. But it was really the River Wild with Kevin Bacon and Meryl Streep that really, I think people really took to him. Where it's like this is a very intense movie, very hard to shoot movie because it was all on location on those riverbanks and stuff. Like wild rapids, all that stuff. The way that movie shot is incredible. He never really went back to do a movie of that scope because after that he did obviously the film noir that kind of defined our generation. I mean, Pulp Fiction did and LA Confidential did, in my opinion. Those two film noir wise were the 90s. There's a definition of that. And then obviously he did Wonder Boys 3 years later, and then he did 8 Mile, which I'll forgive him for. I mean, it's fine. There's no character arcs in that movie, but he didn't write it. He didn't write it. So but then his career kind of dwindled down with In Her Shoes, Lucky You, and then like I said, Chasing Mavericks at the end before he passed away in 2016. So um, he's just brilliant. I mean, not every movie he made was amazing, but his style was always very apparent. And yeah, I think LA Confidential had a lot to do with me continuing to pursue wanting to do something in film for sure.
Well, cheers to that filmmaking.
Hell yeah. So yeah, the only thing I can say about this beer is it's a blonde. There's not a lot of alcohol in it, but it's from his home state. So Spike Jonze and Charlie Kaufman
Great
in
team.
in adaptation, the dial
Uh,
tone scene could only be written by Charlie Kaufman and could only be directed by Spike Jonze. That's the weirdest out of no, you know what I'm talking about, right?
yeah, yeah.
Like it's so fucking weird.
Don't do it.
Yeah, it's so
It's
weird.
annoying. But
And
yeah, yeah, it
because of
is
those
weird.
two people were responsible for making it, it's charming.
Yeah, it's a very strange scene. I actually, it's an interesting scene though because I think that's when you really start to understand that LaRoche doesn't take this drug. He just makes it for her
Yeah.
to get her to spend time with him. I mean, he might sell it elsewhere. I don't know, but and he's so into her that he sits on that phone with someone who's high, making dial tone sounds. Which I like to think is how Charlie Kaufman and Spike Jonze spend their weekends together.
Oh, dude, I'm sure they do. I wish that they should do more stuff together. I mean, God knows this cinema world climate needs more interesting, otherworldly, out of the ordinary. I mean, Wes Anderson's keeping it alive, but man, if those three ever collaborated on something, that would just be my wet dream. Like if they did like
Hmm.
a
Yeah.
three-piece vignette with those guys or something, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the last thing I want to say about your movie, um, it's insane in the best ways. And you know how like the Royal Tannenbaums kind of announced to the world the forever stylings of Wes Anderson? Like
Hmm.
he'd done two movies before and you were kind of seeing a pattern, but now you're like, okay, this is what he's going to do. This is how the movie's going to be paced, how it's going to be set up. I think this film is the epitome of Spike Jonze and Charlie Kaufman doing that moving forward. I know they had already done Being John Malkovich, but this being the second one, you're like, okay, now I know what they're doing. You
Hmm.
know, parallel narratives, all types, just manic pacing, manic editing, manic acting.
That's a really good way to put it. Like even when Charlie talks about like writing being John Malkovich and what he wants like to be different with his next script is a really good way to look at the working nature of Spike Jonze and Charlie Kaufman like together and what they did with their their second collaboration.
Yeah, and I know it was Michel Gondry that directed Eternal Sunshine, but that's my favorite Kaufman script.
Hmm.
I think that movie's a masterpiece. You
Yeah.
know, so
The
great movies.
yeah the millennium was a really good time for existential dramedies because everybody was like living through one at that time.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, it's almost you have a paranoia aspect through escapism, and I for some reason that worked at that time. Like there was a lot of that kind of stuff, like Vanilla Sky,
Yep.
around the same
The
era.
the Matrix.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's great when you kind of pay attention to filmmakers' filmographies, you could see not only where they were at the time, but where the world was. And
Hmm.
then if you know that filmmaker well, other than someone like Tarantino who doesn't give a shit where the world is, he's just making his own thing. He doesn't speak to world issues. He has his own cinematic language.
Well, Tarantino will always make a movie where Nazis are the bad guys, and that's timeless, my friend. I'll say that much.
Well, that's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good thing. To Quentin Tarantino, fighting
Uh,
Nazis through time.
cheers to that.
Yes.
We're way off. All right, everyone. So, please, if you guys are enjoying this, we'd love some comments in the chat. Should have said that earlier. Please click the like, subscribe, hit the notification. We love you guys. And I know there was a couple people that asked when we put out that we were doing this, will we put the beer list out in advance so that you can drink with us? Yes, we will do that via photographs. So look in our community chat if you want to join along and check out some of the beers. Oh, that's just going to happen, folks. It's a show about beer and movies. So, everyone, we've reached our final aspect of our films, which is the theme. What is the theme of the movie? And the beer I chose for that is a beer, and the word is French for society. Societe? I don't know. Brewing company. It's an IPA and it's called the Pupil. And the
Mm.
reason I chose it, for obvious reasons, if you've seen Wonder Boys, is that is James Lear an unwilling pupil to Professor Tripp? Does he want to be? Did he ask to be? Does Tripp want to make him a pupil? It hints that this is that the Love Parade is his first book. It is, in fact, his heart and soul of everything he's done. But he does seem to have more in the tank, and Grady's jealous of that because Grady's been working constantly since the Arsonist daughter. And he's just sort of done an infinite jest on it where it's fucking gazillion pages long. So yeah, so I picked this one based on the name, the sub name, the pupil, because I do believe there's a lot of undertones of will he become a pupil to Professor Tripp? And if not, it doesn't matter because obviously Hannah wants to be, but she also wants to bang him. so this one's I have a lot to say about the theme of this movie, but the beer choice is kind of simple because, give me a fucking break. This is hard.
So, for my final beer,
Oh, oh, that's
how is
pint.
it?
Very piney. It's good.
Piney.
Piney. Tastes like
Nice.
a pine
Nice.
tree.
Oh, well, next time,
Anyway,
just save the money, go look a tree, I guess.
sorry. I cut you off, Ben.
So for my final beer, I picked Andy Gator, which is a Hell's Doppelbock, and I chose this because to go along with the theme of the film. The theme is I don't know. There's a lot going on in that film, but I guess the theme is about kind of making your own story, like choosing to live the life you want to live. Like we're surrounded by sadness and bullshit every day, but we can choose what to do with it. So Donald has this really great line towards the end of the film that kind of changes Charlie's disposition, where he says, yeah, I got it down. You are what you love, not what loves you. And I thought that was just a wonderful line. It says a lot about who the character of Donald was. And what I love is that big ass alligator that gets LaRoche at the end of the movie.
Yeah, it's so out of nowhere.
It comes out of nowhere, but you know it's coming in a sense because very early on at the beginning of the film, Charlie has lunch with Tilda Swinton's character. He talks about the kind of film he doesn't want to make, with car chases and gunfights and romance and blah, 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 blah. And then adaptation of the film becomes that as it goes on. And at one point, he even takes a writing class. And one of the main things he walks away with is, God help you if you use a Deus Ex Machina. And that's exactly what happens at the end.
Yeah.
That gator chomps down LaRoche. And I loved it. And I love this beer.
Do you? I'm loving this IPA. Cheers. Cheers to our
Yeah.
themes of our movies. So we were going to talk about, you had brought up foreshadowing.
Mm-hmm.
So what were you going to bring up when you had mentioned that after this another viewing of Adaptation?
So something I haven't seen Adaptation till since I don't know, 2004, 2005, something like that. And I only saw it the one time. So I now kind of knowing what was going to happen in the film, I didn't realize that that the lunch that Charlie has with Tilda Swinton, he's everything he says he doesn't want in the movie ends up happening. And the goal for the initial goal for him is to write the screenplay where it's like real life, where nothing happens. You know, there's disappointment. There's no change. Nobody changes. No one's dynamic. And there's so many times in the film where there are people that those things are happening to, and like change is forced upon Charlie also, and that is real life. And I thought it was so smart to write Donald the fake twin, because they're not the same person. They're very different people, but they could be the same people, and that's what you and I walking around bumping into each other is. We're just people, and we get to choose if we want to look out at the world and say it's shit or say it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I thought the film, there was foreshadowing about all that I only picked up on this viewing.
Yeah, and all of us as human beings have at least two different sides to us.
Mm-hmm.
The one that's usually never seen, the one that we think about all the time, is the cooler one.
Yeah.
That's the one you want to be, but limitations cause that not to happen or whatever. And I think one of the things I like about Adaptation, Charlie Kaufman's script, is it feels like it's a movie where his confidence, like, so the point where Charlie finally gets the confidence to talk to the girl and tell her how he feels, and then she's like, "Why so late, Charlie?" or whatever at the end. And then you go back to earlier parts of the movie where Charlie is talking about, I have an idea for script, but it can't have this, can't have this, can't have this. I feel like it was Charlie Kaufman, real life writer, knowing his limitations or thinking he has limitations, but really wanting to break out of those with something different and new. And he really kind of has yet to do that, because why break what's not broken, right? But it would almost be like the equivalent of Charlie Kaufman came out and wrote a Die Hard movie, or did a God forbid a Marvel movie or something. I think.
Yeah, he's definitely is. Something I find really funny about just the whole meta humor, and it's ironic, is like, so he wants to do something different. So now that he's done Being John Malkovich, he's like, people expect me to do this weird artsy existential thing. I don't
Right,
want to
right.
do it, right? And then he also wants to buck what a successful movie in the eyes of a Hollywood studio would be, which would have romance and car chases and gunfights and
Yeah.
intrigue and
Sky
yada yada, all these
beams.
things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then somewhere in the middle, he thinks there's this perfect movie where nothing happens, essentially.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Like in life, things do start to happen, and the story within the story starts to move forward, and it becomes so it becomes even more existential and weird, like a Charlie Kaufman movie. At the same time, with more elements that would please a studio and be the kind of like adventure thing, like you think would get people in to see the movie, but in a very like self-referential way that doesn't make it that kind of movie at the same time. So I don't know. I just thought that was really cool
Yeah.
self-commentary he had about, I think, his own career.
It is. That's what I love about his writing so much.
Mm-hmm.
And you can almost take Adaptation and Wonder Boys and call them absolute opposite types of movies.
Mm-hmm.
Because whereas Adaptation does it, it does go there. Wonder Boys is filled with characters who tell you these stories. But the thing I love about Wonder Boys, as we get into theme, is that it always keeps it. I don't want to say restrained. That's not the word. It has a lot of, if you think about the movie, it has a lot of screwball comedy ideas. They shoot a dog. They're trying to steal Marilyn Monroe's coat. There's all kinds of wacky stuff. They give the kid too many drugs, and he's all goofy and starts yelling out at Wordfest. The big party gets thrown. He gets stoned. He's eating things. He's drinking expensive whiskey, and the people come home. Like, there's all these things that could have made it really off the wall, but it makes choices and decisions to kind of keep itself at this thing where it's like, if you're not paying attention, you're not laughing. But if you are paying attention, it's very funny.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like if you're reading a book, are you reading it out loud or are you reading it to yourself? You know what I mean? I think the theme of that movie is how Jones, Stockton, read chapter 2 or read the first chapter for us. And you're like, oh shit. And you're like in the 5th grade. You're just reading through it to get through it. You don't even know what the fuck you just read when it's over. You just wanted to get through it and read every word correctly so that people didn't make fun of you for not reading it right.
Mm-hmm.
Then you take that book home and you read that paragraph again and you visualize what it means. And you're like, oh, I understood what I just read out loud. I feel like Wonder Boy's theme is that. It's made that way. And that's why I love Curtis Hanson so much. And Steve Kloves, the guy who wrote it. It's like, it's a meditation on everybody staring at the surroundings and going, I can make something of this. I could write that scene where they're in the bar and they're like, hey, that guy's name is Vernon. They're like, that guy looks like
James Brown's cape.
James Brown.
Was the guy. When James Brown couldn't do it on stage anymore, he'd be the guy that came out with the cape. Like, oh, Mr. Brown, we got you.
James Brown, yeah. And they're staring at him from across the bar, and they're each telling stories about what they think his life is. And
yes.
I've done that before.
I love that scene.
I love that scene too.
Downey Jr. and Douglas say their joke about this guy's name is Vernon. And then James Lear, Tobey Maguire adds a bit, and it's good. It's good. It's a little bit of drama. And
Freddie Knuckles or whatever.
Yeah, Downey Jr. Crabtree's impressed, and Douglas just points out that all he was doing was paying attention.
Yeah,
I love that Douglas has so many points in the movie where people are impressed by Lear or whatever, and it's like, if you only paid attention, and that's what storytelling can be to a storyteller sometimes. And sorry not to detract from what you're saying, but
no, it's not detracting at all. It's my point exactly. Yeah, keep going.
I'm done.
Oh no, you can look at the same equivalent with so many things. If you're listening, then you hear what someone's saying and you know how to respond. If you're staring at somebody waiting to talk, you're not listening. You don't know how to like you and I are having this conversation. I'm listening to every word you're saying, and I assume you're listening to every word I'm saying, which is why we can have this back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
One of the best lines in this movie is from Katie Holmes' Hannah, where when she's reading his book, his new book, and she's just like, her jaw's on the floor because it's so long, and she's kind of ripped it off from his office. And she goes, you didn't make any choices.
You didn't really make any choices.
There's a whole point of this movie where, like, going back to what I said about it could have been a screwball comedy, it could have been like goofy and Animal House-ish. The choices it made kept it from being that, because it's a respectful movie of what it's trying to say about authors. It's not disrespecting any author, even though there's authors like the Walter Gaskell guy who's like, oh, they're going to publish my book, because yeah, what was it called? The Last American
Marriage.
Marriage.
Last American Marriage.
Yeah. And that guy's such a fucking chode, man.
Yeah.
But even still, it's such a, like, I can't imagine a real good author looking at that movie and going like, oh, that's a piece of shit. That's not how writers are. Maybe it is, but everyone I've ever met that's written something or been in writing classes or actually been published really liked this movie. And I think there's a reason for that, because it's great. But
it is a great film. They're both great films.
They are. And they're both about writers. And they're both made by extremely awesome fucking filmmakers. One deceased, one not. I got to say, though, in your movie, if I was ever asked what two people I would like to meet, I would not say Jesus or Einstein. I would probably say like Johnny Cash and Bob Marley or something. Like, who would you say?
Honestly, I probably pick Charlie Coffin and Spike Jonze just so I can ask him what the fuck.
There you go. Hey, everybody, if you've made it this far, I really am stoked, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Hope you're enjoying it. Many more to come. But Ben, out of all your beers, which one's been your favorite?
Oh, well, let me just say, Good Vibrations is one of the most interesting beers I've ever had.
Well, that's the like marshmallow banana cream pie.
Yeah, the banana cream pie beer. And I love a good amber ale, so the Away from the Norm is great. But I'm definitely going with Andy Gator because it's 8%.
How much? What's the percentage?
8%.
Oh, nice.
That was an easy choice. I
have to say, my favorite is also my last. It's the Pupil is fucking great. It's a great IPA. It's just a regular IPA. 7.5. Like I said, it's piney, so it's got that bitterness. It doesn't have the citra, so it doesn't have that kind of citrusy aftertaste. It's an excellent IPA. I picked it for the goddamn name. It turned out to be the best beer of the bunch.
There you go.
So what we're going to do is we're going to fill each one of our favorite beer of the night to the top and do a final farewell sipping of our flights as we talked about our flicks. This is Ben S. from Cinema Gulp. This is Ben J. from Cinema Gulp. Watch these movies. Drink these beers. Subscribe. Ben, love you, buddy.
Gulp you later, bud.
I drink it up!